Hello friends, welcome to 2D Games with Unity tutorial series. Let me double click on Unity icon. Let me click on Unity 2D demo project to open it in Unity IDE. In the previous tutorial, we understood transform tool. We use the hand tool to navigate around the scene. If we are in the 3D mode, if we hold the Alt key, we activate the rotate view tool and we can rotate the view itself. We can rotate the view or we can rotate the world. I switch back to 2D mode, and if we can zoom in and zoom out by using the mouse wheel. If we need to translate some selected game object, we use the translation tool. If we need to rotate the selected game object, we can use the rotation tool. If we need to scale the selected game object, we use the scale tool. If we need to translate, rotate and scale all at a time, we can use the rect transform tool. Also, we understood that if we need to focus some game object, we can click on that game object, bring the mouse cursor in the scene, press the F key. You can see that the main camera got focused. If I click on the player, move the mouse cursor in the scene and press the F key, the player will get focused. The tools that you see here, they all have shortcut keys. You can see now, if I press the Q key, the hand tool will get activated. If I press the W key, the translation tool will get activated. If I press the E key, the rotation tool will get activated. If I press the R key, the scale tool will get activated. If I press the T key, the rect transform tool will get activated. So you can use Q, W, E, R, T keys to activate the required tool. In this tutorial, I am going to discuss about pivot point. What is the meaning of pivot? How it is useful in creating the scene or editing the scene. First of all, I click on this player, then I press the delete key to delete the player. Next, you can see that I have a player image in the assets folder. Whenever you bring any image into your project, it is going to have a pivot point. Every image that you bring, it is going to have a pivot point. Now, what is pivot? Pivot indicates a reference point. You can also say as anchor point. Now, pivot point is taken as a reference for positioning, rotating, and scaling the selected game object. That means here we have a player image, and the player image has a pivot set to center. You can see that it is set to center. That means this image center point or the center is taken as a reference for position. What happens when I drag this player into the hierarchy? This center point, this pivot point is placed on the origin. That means if I drag and drop, you can see that the center or the pivot is taken as a reference and placed the image on the scene. The pivot point is placed exactly on the origin. That is what happens. That's what the pivot is. That is the reason you can see that half of the image is on the right hand side, half of the image is on the left hand side, half of the image is upward, half of the image is down. I click on this player again and press the delete key to delete, and let me click on the player and show the effect of pivot. I click on this drop down box and click on top left. I am changing the pivot point to top left. Whenever you make any modification, click on the apply button, it will get applied. Now this time we told to the system to refer the top left corner of this image as a pivot point or a reference point or a anchor point. If I drag and drop this image into the hierarchy, then what happens means this reference point or a pivot point is placed on the origin. That means what happens? The image will get displayed in this box. In this place you can see that one. If I drag and drop, you can see that the image got displayed here. The reason is this point of the image is placed on the origin. And also you can see the position in X, Y, Z is 0, 0, 0. No change. Let me click on the player and delete it. Again I click on the player to show you the effect of pivot. If I click on the top right and apply, this image's top right corner is taken as a reference for positioning. So if I drag and drop, what happens? This top right corner is placed on the origin here. So the image will get displayed in this place. If I drag and drop, check that out. The top right corner is placed on the origin. So pivot affects the positioning of the game object. I select this and change this to bottom left and apply. If I say the bottom left, this corner is taken as a reference and that corner is placed on the origin. So image will get displayed in this place. You can see that. I click on the player and delete it. I click on this player image. I change to bottom right. I hit apply. Now you can see the bottom right. This bottom right is taken as a reference and placed on the origin. So image will get displayed in this place. If I drag and drop, you can see that the image got displayed over here. I click on the player and delete. I click on the player. If I reset it back to center and apply, the center is placed on the origin. So the image will get displayed in this place. So if I drag and drop, it has got displayed in this place. I click on the player again. I change the pivot point to top. I click on apply button. Now top point is here, the top point. That top point is taken as a reference and it is placed on the origin. So here this will be placed over here. So what happens? The image will be get displayed in this place. So if you see here, image got displayed here, and this small circle that you see, the circle that indicates where is the pivot point. I delete it. I click. Now I change it to the left and apply. If I drag and drop, this left point is taken as a reference and placed on the origin. So the image will get displayed in this place. If I drag and drop, you can see that the image got displayed over here, and this is the pivot point or a reference point, and that point taken for position. I delete it and I change it to the right and apply, and the right point is taken as a reference for positioning. So the image will get displayed in this place. You can see that. Let me click on the player and delete, and I can select the bottom and apply. Now bottom is here. This bottom point is taken as a reference and that point will be placed on the origin. So if I drag and drop, you can see that the image got displayed here. Reference point or a pivot point is taken for positioning. Let me click on the player and delete. And also you have the option here, custom. Now custom allows to change the position. By default, the pivot point or pivot position is exactly half of the width and half of the height. So 0.5, 0.5. So you can give here also. If I give here 0, 0 and apply. So 0, 0, we know that the bottom left is the 0, 0 here. So if I drag and drop, you can see that the bottom left is placed on the origin and image got displayed over here. Let me click on the player and delete. And this image's top corner, this place is taken as 1, 1. So if I say here 1 and apply, so top right is 1, 1 actually. So top right is taken as a reference and placed, so image will get displayed in this place. You can see that. So let me click on the player again and delete. So as we know that 0, 0 is here at the corner, 1, 1 is here at the corner. So the middle will be 0.5, 0.5. So that will be the default value, 0.5, 0.5. That is the center. Apply, and if I drag and drop, you can see that the image got displayed on the scene with respect to the pivot point. I click on the player and delete. Let me click again and change it to center and apply and drag and drop. We have the image now. So now we understood how the pivot point affects the positioning or a placement of a game object. Pivot point not only affects the positioning, it also affects the rotation scale. So if I click on the player, now we have a pivot point set to center, and you can see here we have the translation tool, and also you can see we have a switch button and that is displaying pivot. Now what is the meaning of that? I am going to tell to the system that place the translation gizmo at the pivot position. So if I click on this, we get the translation gizmo exactly on the pivot point of the player. So we know that the pivot of this player is center. So gizmo will get displayed at the center. You can see that. If I change this button to center, it will be in the same place because the image's center is this place. And we can move left, right, up, down. Let me reset everything back. Let me click on direct transform tool. Then I click on the player. I change the pivot point to top left and hit apply. Now you can see that player has got automatically moved in the scene. With respect to the pivot point, the player is positioned. As top left corner is the pivot point, the top left corner is placed on the origin. You can see that. If I delete and drag and drop, the same thing happens. You can see that. Now this time what I am going to do is I am going to tell to the system, place the translation tool at the center. So if I click on that, you can see that the translation gizmo got displayed at the center of the image. No problem. reset back. I'm going to tell to system to place the translation gizmo at the pivot point by switching it. So now it is displaying pivot, and you can see the translation gizmo got displayed at the pivot point. We know that the top corner, top left corner is the pivot point. So you can move like this. So pivot point affects the placement as well as translation, and this control tells to the system where to place these gizmos, whether the gizmos should be placed at the center or the gizmo should be placed at the pivot point. That is what this button indicates. Let me click on direct transform tool and go to player. I change this to left. I click on the left and I click on apply button. This time you can see that the image's left point is taken as a reference for placement. You can see that. And now I tell to the system place the translation tool at the pivot point on the player. So you can see that it got displayed here. Translation gizmo got displayed at the pivot point. So I can translate left, right, up, down, reset back, and also I tell to the system now you have to place the translation tool translation gizmo at the center. So you can see that it has placed the translation gizmo at the center of the image. Let me click on the player and delete it. Let me click on the player and change it to the center and apply. The pivot point also affects the rotation. That means now we have the pivot set to center. If I drag and drop, we know that it is placed at the center of the scene. Let me click on the red transform tool and then drag and drop. So you can see that the image got displayed over here. Now I am going to tell to the system that place the rotation gizmo at the center. If I click on the rotation tool, the rotation gizmo got displayed at the center and I can rotate it. No problem. Let me reset everything back. Now I tell to the system place the rotation tool at the pivot point. So I switch back to pivot point, click on the player again. So pivot is exactly at the center. There is no problem. Pivot is also in the center, so there will be no problem. This time what I do, I delete this player. I click on this player button, player image. Then I click on top left corner and hit apply. Now you should remember that pivot point is set to top left. If I drag and drop, it is placed over here. Let me click on the red transform tool and drag and drop. You can see that it is placed over here. Then I tell to the system display the rotation gizmo at the pivot point. So if I click on that, it has got displayed at the pivot point. And if I rotate, the pivot point is taken as a reference for rotation. You can see that your image will get rotated like this. Let me reset everything back. Let me click outside and click on the player. This time I tell to the system to place the rotation gizmo at the center. Now it is displayed at the center. If I rotate, this center is taken as a reference for rotation. You can see that it is rotating like this. So you should understand how pivot affects. What is the meaning of pivot? What is the meaning of center over here? Let me click on this player image and reset back. Let me click on the player game object and delete that, and let me click on the player image and change it back to center. Hope you guys are understand. Now what I do, I am going to discuss about how the pivot affects for scaling. Now we know that the player has the pivot point at the center. If I drag and drop, it will get displayed in the center of the scene. Then I tell to the system place the scale gizmo at the center. So I click on this, you can see that scale gizmo got displayed in the center. And if I drag and they are scaling, you can see. Let me click on the player and delete. Let me click on player and change it to the top left and hit apply. I click on the red transform. Now we know that top left corner of this image is taken as a reference. So image will get displayed in this place. Here we have. Now I tell to the system to place the scale gizmo at the center. So scale gizmo got displayed in the center. If I drag, it will scale in both the sides. If I drag, it will scale in both the sides. Let me reset everything back. Click on the control panel, drag it down. Now this time I tell to the system that place the gizmo at the pivot point. If I say pivot, you can see that the gizmo got displayed or placed at the pivot point. If I drag this handle, you can see that how it is scaling. It is not scaling in both the directions. It is scaling in horizontal in this direction because this point is taken as a reference for scaling. So I can scale like this. You can see that. So that is about the pivot point and the center switch or a toggle button here that we have. Let me click on the player and delete. Let me go to project panel. I click on this player and select the center point. And if I drag and drop, of course, it is telling me to apply. So I click on apply button. Now it is placed over here. I can use the rect transform tool. Now rect transform tool is a very useful tool. We know that we can translate, rotate and scale everything we can perform using this tool. And here a small circle that you see, it indicates where is the pivot point. The pivot point is over here. So if I rotate, it rotates like this. There is no problem in that. If I scale, it scales only in one direction. Understand this. I click on the player and delete. Let me click on the player. I change this to left and hit apply. This time if I drag and drop, it will get displayed in this place. You can see that. And it is showing here we have the pivot point or reference point. And if I rotate, that point is taken as a reference for rotation. Check that out. You see that? The pivot is taken as a reference point for rotation. Let me reset it back to 0, 0, 0. Let me click on the player again. If I change this to center and rotate and start rotating, you can see that the rotation is happening around the center, not at the pivot point. So that is how the pivot affects the rotation, translation, scale. So for this tutorial, this much is enough, friends. In the next tutorial, we discuss about this next button called as global. What is that? So for more benefits, please subscribe, like, comment and share. Thank you guys. Thank you very much. See you in the next tutorial. Keep learning, keep coding, keep sharing.